American Civil War, a defining struggle in U.S. history. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was one of the most transformative and devastating conflicts in the nation's history. Fought primarily over the institution of slavery, states' rights, and the very definition of freedom and union, the war reshaped the political and social landscape of the United States. Its enduring legacy continues to influence the nation's identity today. Causes of the conflict. In the early 19th century, deep divisions arose between the North and South as the United States expanded westward. The Southern economy relied heavily on enslaved African Americans for labor on cotton and other cash crops. Meanwhile, the North, which was more industrialized and urbanized, had abolished slavery and sought to limit its spread. Tensions mounted with a series of legislative compromises that ultimately failed to resolve the issue. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the Compromise of 1850 attempted to balance interests, while the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 intensified sectional conflict, leading to violence in Bleeding Kansas. Key events further fueled the divide. The publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1852, humanized the brutality of slavery and bolstered abolitionist sentiment in the North. The Dred Scott Supreme Court decision, 1857, denied African Americans citizenship and ruled that Congress could not prohibit slavery in the territories, outraging many in the North. The final straw was the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. Despite his promise not to interfere with slavery where it already existed, Southern states feared his Republican Party would undermine their way of life. In response, 7 Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. Outbreak and military strategies. The war officially began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. In response, Lincoln called for volunteers to suppress the rebellion, prompting 4 more states to secede and join the Confederacy. The Union, with its greater population and industrial base, planned to suffocate the Confederacy through the Anaconda Plan, which involved a naval blockade and control of the Mississippi River. The Confederacy, on the other hand, relied on strong military leadership, a home field advantage, and the hope of foreign intervention due to European reliance on Southern cotton. Early battles, such as the First Battle of Bull Run, July 1861, showed that the war would be long and brutal. The Battle of Antietam, September 1862, the bloodiest single day in U.S. history, gave Lincoln the confidence to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. A war for freedom. On January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation declared all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory to be free. While it didn't immediately liberate everyone, it profoundly changed the war's purpose, shifting it from a struggle to preserve the Union to a fight for human freedom. The proclamation also discouraged European powers from supporting the Confederacy and allowed African Americans to enlist in the Union Army, with nearly 180,000 black soldiers and sailors ultimately serving. The year 1863 marked a turning point. The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1–3, 1863, in Pennsylvania, ended General Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North, inflicting heavy losses. At the same time, Union General Ulysses S. Grant captured Vicksburg, Mississippi, giving the Union full control of the Mississippi River and effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. In November 1863, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address eloquently redefined the war's purpose, framing it as a test of whether a nation, conceived in liberty, could long endure. The end of the war and its aftermath. By 1864, Grant's strategy of relentless engagement in Virginia and General William Tecumseh Sherman's march to the sea through Georgia devastated the South's infrastructure and broke Confederate morale. The Union's naval blockade strangled Southern trade, leading to severe shortages and widespread desertion. The war ended on April 9, 1865, when Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Tragically, just 5 days later, President Lincoln was assassinated by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. The Civil War was the deadliest conflict in American history, with an estimated 620,000 to 750,000 deaths. However, its outcome preserved the Union and led to the abolition of slavery. The 13th Amendment 1865 formally ended slavery, followed by the 14th Amendment 1868 granting citizenship and the 15th Amendment 1870 ensuring voting rights for black men. Despite these constitutional advances, the post-war period of Reconstruction faced violent resistance in the South. The fight for true equality would continue for generations. The Civil War remains a defining moment, resolving the question of secession and setting the stage for a stronger, more unified and more just nation. After Abraham Lincoln's election, the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was sparked when 11 southern states seceded, fearing he would restrict slavery. Brutal battles like Antietam and Gettysburg showed the conflict's immense cost, while the Emancipation Proclamation broadened its purpose, turning it into a war for freedom. The Union ultimately won, but at a staggering price. Over 600,000 lives were lost. Soon after the victory, President Lincoln was tragically assassinated. The period of Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, that followed abolished slavery and granted new constitutional rights to African Americans. However, progress was met with fierce resistance, and it was eventually undermined by Jim Crow laws. Although incomplete, Reconstruction laid the foundation for future civil rights struggles and continues to shape America's ongoing pursuit of liberty and equality.